There are moments in life when certain people begin slowly disappearing from your world, and at first, it hurts more than you can explain. Conversations become colder. Relationships grow distant. People you once trusted suddenly feel unfamiliar. And maybe lately, you have been asking yourself why so many connections around you seem to be changing. But what if those endings are not random? What if God is quietly removing certain people from your life before they damage your peace, your purpose, or your soul even more deeply? Because sometimes the greatest protection God gives a person does not arrive through blessings. Sometimes it arrives through separation. There are people you keep begging God to let you keep, while God is trying to save you from the emotional destruction they would eventually bring into your future. And maybe tonight, your soul is finally ready to understand why some people can no longer go where God is taking you. The first type of people God often removes from your life are the ones who constantly drain your spirit. These are the people who leave you emotionally exhausted every single time you interact with them. They create anxiety instead of peace. Confusion instead of clarity. You spend hours overthinking conversations with them. You feel emotionally smaller around them. And deep inside, your spirit never truly feels safe in their presence. But because human beings confuse attachment with love, many people stay connected to relationships that quietly destroy their soul. Maybe you already know someone like this. Every time you begin healing, they pull you back into emotional chaos. Every time you try to grow, they make you doubt yourself again. And slowly, your peace disappears without you even realizing why. But God never intended your life to become a place where your soul constantly feels heavy. Sometimes He removes people because your future cannot survive the version of yourself that keeps shrinking to keep them comfortable. The second type of people God quietly removes are the ones who distract you from your purpose. These people may not seem harmful at first. In fact, they may even feel exciting, familiar, or emotionally comforting. But over time, you begin noticing something dangerous. Around them, you slowly lose connection to who you truly are. Your focus disappears. Your discipline weakens. Your peace fades. You stop growing spiritually. You stop listening to your intuition. And eventually, you become disconnected from the path your soul was actually meant to walk. Some people enter your life not to build you, but to delay you. And the frightening part is that distraction often feels comfortable in the beginning. That is why many people do not realize they are moving away from God until they feel completely spiritually exhausted. But God sees what your emotions cannot see. He knows which relationships nourish your soul, and which ones slowly poison it beneath the surface. So sometimes, He removes distractions before they completely destroy your direction. The third type of people God often removes from your life are the ones who only love the version of you that remains broken. These people become uncomfortable when you begin healing. Uncomfortable when you gain confidence. Uncomfortable when you stop tolerating disrespect. They benefited from the exhausted version of you. The insecure version. The version that constantly overgave emotionally while accepting very little in return. But once you begin protecting your peace, everything changes. Suddenly they accuse you of changing. Becoming distant. Becoming different. But the truth is, healing always reveals who was truly happy for your growth and who secretly depended on your pain. Not everyone connected to you is assigned to your future. Some people were only attached to the wounded version of you because your brokenness made them comfortable. And maybe tonight, God is teaching you that not every relationship deserves permanent access to your soul. There are moments where losing certain people feels like heartbreak, until time reveals it was actually protection. Because human beings often cry over what God was trying to save them from. You beg for people to stay while your spirit quietly breaks apart trying to keep them in your life. You ignore your intuition because loneliness scares you. You tolerate emotional chaos. Because part of you believes suffering is normal. But eventually, your soul becomes exhausted from carrying relationships that no longer align with peace. And that exhaustion matters. Because God often speaks through the loss of peace first. Maybe lately you have noticed certain people naturally drifting away. Conversations becoming less frequent. Connections weakening without explanation. And perhaps part of you feels confused or hurt by it. But sometimes distance is mercy. Sometimes unanswered messages are protection. Sometimes God removes people quietly because He knows your heart would never willingly let go on its own. Human beings often hold on to familiarity even when familiarity is hurting them. But God sees beyond the temporary comfort. He sees the future version of you. The healed version. The peaceful version. The version no longer willing to abandon themselves emotionally just to keep others close. There are people listening tonight who secretly know certain relationships are draining their spirit, but they keep staying because they fear being alone. But loneliness is not always punishment. Sometimes solitude becomes the place where God rebuilds your identity without the noise of people constantly pulling you away from yourself. Some of the deepest healing happens after separation. After the chaos quiets down. After the emotional confusion leaves. And suddenly, for the first time in years, your soul can finally breathe again. The truth is, not everyone who entered your life was meant to remain there forever. Some people were lessons. Some were warnings. Some were temporary assignments meant to teach you something before moving on. But human beings struggle to release people because we become emotionally attached to potential. We keep hoping they will become who we need them to be. But sometimes, God removes people because He knows they will never become healthy for your spirit no matter how much you love them. And maybe tonight, God is asking you to stop chasing people He already removed. Stop reopening doors He already closed. Stop sacrificing your peace trying to save relationships that are quietly destroying your soul. Because healing begins when you stop fighting the separation God allowed for your protection. One day, you will look back at certain endings differently. You will realize that some people leaving saved your peace. Some distances protected your future. Some heartbreaks redirected your life completely. And perhaps most importantly, you will realize that God was never trying to take love away from you. He was trying to remove what no longer aligned with the person your soul was becoming. So tonight, if certain people are fading from your life, do not rush to call it abandonment. Sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is God clearing space for healthier relationships, deeper peace, and a stronger version of yourself to finally emerge. And maybe the greatest blessing is not always who enters your life, but who God lovingly removes before they destroy the peace He was trying to build inside you. And if these words touched your heart tonight, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so we can continue walking together through healing, faith, peace, and hope in the videos ahead. There is a kind of collapse that begins long before your life visibly falls apart. It starts quietly inside the soul. A slow exhaustion. A constant heaviness. A feeling that something is no longer right, even when everything on the outside still appears normal. And maybe lately, you have been feeling that collapse happening inside yourself. You wake up tired even after sleeping. Conversations drain you. Certain people leave your spirit feeling anxious instead of peaceful. And no matter how hard you try to hold everything together, your soul feels like it is slowly breaking underneath the pressure. At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself you are just emotional. Just stressed. Just overwhelmed for a little while. But deep inside, you know something deeper is happening. Because life collapse often begins the moment your spirit becomes exhausted from carrying relationships, environments, and emotional burdens that were never healthy for you in the first place. There are people tonight who secretly feel disconnected from themselves. They continue smiling around. Others while privately feeling emotionally numb. They continue showing up for everyone else while silently collapsing inside. And perhaps the hardest part is this. Nobody around them fully notices how much pain they are carrying because they became too good at hiding it. Some people learned very early in life that survival meant silence. So instead of expressing pain, they buried it. Instead of asking for help, they became the strong one. And after years of carrying emotional weight alone, the soul eventually reaches its limit. Some of you tonight are grieving people who are no longer part of your life. And maybe part of you still wonders why those relationships had to end the way they did. But sometimes, God allows separation because your soul can no longer survive inside the emotional chaos certain people bring into your life. Human beings often mistake emotional attachment for love. We keep fighting for relationships that slowly destroy our peace because loneliness feels terrifying. But familiar pain is still pain. And eventually, your spirit becomes exhausted from trying to force connections that God has already been asking you to release. There are nights during life collapse where silence becomes unbearable. Because silence forces you to sit with thoughts you spent years trying to avoid. The heartbreak. The disappointment. The loneliness. The painful realization that some people only loved the version of you that remained emotionally available for their needs, not the version trying to heal. And slowly, you begin realizing how much of yourself you abandon trying to keep others comfortable. There are people listening tonight who no longer recognize themselves. The peaceful version of them feels far away. The emotionally alive version feels buried underneath exhaustion. And maybe part of them secretly wonders if they will ever feel whole again. But pain changes people quietly. After enough disappointment, people stop expecting peace. They stop trusting easily. They stop allowing themselves to hope fully because every previous hope ended in heartbreak. And eventually, survival mode becomes normal. But surviving is not the same thing as living. Some of you became emotionally exhausted because you spent your whole life trying to earn love from the wrong people. Trying to prove your value. Trying to become enough. You overgave emotionally. Over-sacrificed your peace. Ignored your boundaries. And somewhere along the way, you lost connection to your own soul completely. But human beings were never created to destroy themselves trying to feel chosen. There are moments during collapse where even small things begin feeling overwhelming. Answering messages feels exhausting. Social situations drain your energy. Your mind never fully rests. Anxiety follows you everywhere, even into moments that should feel peaceful. And maybe you keep asking yourself why life feels heavier for you than it seems to feel for everyone else. But what many people fail to realize is this: some souls are carrying invisible wounds nobody else can see. Childhood rejection. Emotional neglect. Betrayal. Years of suppressing pain because survival required silence. And eventually, all those hidden wounds rise to the surface. Some people collapse emotionally because they built their identity around being needed by others. Around being useful. Around being the strong one everyone depends on. But they never learned how to rest. Never learned how to receive love safely. Never learned how to exist without constantly sacrificing themselves emotionally. And over time, the soul begins breaking underneath the pressure of endless emotional survival. Maybe tonight your spirit feels exhausted because God is trying to wake you up before you lose yourself completely. Maybe the collapse is not punishment. Maybe it is protection. Maybe God is showing you that you cannot continue abandoning your peace forever just to maintain relationships that slowly poison your soul. There are versions of yourself that must die before healing can begin. The version terrified of disappointing everyone. The version addicted to external validation. The version willing to suffer endlessly just to avoid being alone. Transformation always feels painful before it feels freeing. There are moments during life collapse where you feel spiritually lost too. You pray, but feel silence. You ask God for direction, but feel confusion instead. And because of that, some people begin believing God abandoned them during their suffering. But often, God is closest during the seasons where everything false begins falling apart. Because collapse strips away illusions. It exposes wounds hidden beneath performance and distraction. It forces honesty. And healing cannot begin until honesty does. Maybe tonight. God is asking you to stop pretending your soul is okay when internally you feel exhausted beyond words. Stop ignoring the anxiety. Stop ignoring the emotional heaviness. Stop ignoring the repeated heartbreak and constant loss of peace. Because your spirit has been trying to warn you for a very long time. There are stronger parts of you waiting underneath this collapse. Softer parts. Wiser parts. A version of you that no longer sacrifices peace just to feel loved. A version that understands healthy love does not require emotional self-destruction. A version that finally realizes rest is holy too. But before that version fully emerges, the old life often has to fall apart first. One day, you will look back at this painful season differently. You will realize that certain people leaving protected your peace. Certain endings redirected your future. Certain heartbreaks forced you to finally become honest about wounds you spent years avoiding. And perhaps most importantly, you will realize that even during your darkest nights, God never stopped carrying your soul quietly underneath the exhaustion. So tonight, if your life feels like it is collapsing internally, if your spirit feels tired beyond words, if your heart feels disconnected from peace, please remember this. Collapse is not always the end. Sometimes collapse is where healing begins. Sometimes it is where God lovingly breaks apart the life that was slowly destroying you, so He can rebuild your soul on stronger foundations. And maybe tonight, even through all this pain, transformation has already quietly begun inside you. And if these words touched your heart tonight, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so we can continue walking together through healing, faith, peace, and hope in the videos ahead. There is a depth of suffering that words can barely describe. A kind of pain that slowly settles into the soul until a person no longer remembers what peace used to feel like. And maybe lately, you have been living inside that kind of pain. You still wake up every morning. You still continue through your routine. You still smile when people talk to you. But behind your eyes, there is exhaustion. Behind your silence, there are wounds nobody else truly sees. And perhaps the hardest part is this: you are becoming tired of pretending you are okay when deep inside, your spirit feels like it is quietly collapsing. Deep suffering rarely begins with one dramatic moment. Most of the time, it builds slowly. Through years of emotional disappointment. Through relationships that drained your soul. Through constantly carrying other people's burdens while ignoring your own pain. Through nights where you cried silently because you did not want anyone to know how broken you truly felt. And eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. There are people listening tonight who secretly feel emotionally numb. Not because they stopped caring, but because they cared too deeply for too long without feeling safe emotionally. They became exhausted from constantly overthinking. Constantly giving. Constantly trying to hold everything together while nobody noticed they were quietly falling apart inside. And after enough heartbreak, survival mode became their normal way of living. But surviving is not the same thing as peace. Some of you tonight feel disconnected from yourself completely. The peaceful version of you feels far away now. The hopeful version feels buried underneath exhaustion. You look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back at you. And maybe part of you wonders if you will ever feel emotionally whole again. But pain changes people quietly. After enough disappointment, people stop expecting good things to last. They stop trusting easily. They stop allowing themselves to hope fully because hope became associated with heartbreak. There are nights during deep suffering where silence feels unbearable. Because silence forces you to sit with thoughts you spent years trying to avoid. Regrets. Fear. Loneliness. The painful realization that some people only loved the version of you that remained emotionally available for their needs, not the version trying to heal. And slowly, you begin understanding how much of yourself you sacrifice just to keep certain people in your life. Some of you became emotionally exhausted because you spent your whole life trying to earn love. Trying to become enough. Trying to prove your value to people who could never truly see your worth clearly in the first place. You overgave emotionally. Over-sacrificed your peace. Ignored your boundaries. And somewhere along the way, your soul became empty from constantly pouring into others while nobody poured back into you. Human beings were never created to destroy themselves trying to feel chosen. There are people tonight who secretly feel ashamed for struggling this much internally. They compare themselves to everyone else who seems peaceful and emotionally stable. They wonder why surviving life feels heavier for them than it seems to feel for others. But what many people fail to understand is this: some souls are carrying invisible wounds nobody else can see. Childhood rejection. Emotional neglect. Betrayal. Years of suppressing emotions because survival required silence. And eventually, those hidden wounds rise to the surface. Some of you tonight became the strong one for everyone else. The helper. The listener. The dependable person everybody leaned on emotionally. But deep inside, you desperately needed someone to carry you too. You needed rest. You needed gentleness. You needed someone to ask how you were truly doing instead of only depending on your strength constantly. But because you became so used to hiding pain, nobody realized how exhausted your spirit had become. Deep suffering often happens quietly because people learn how to function while broken. They continue working. Continue smiling. Continue helping others. While internally, they feel emotionally shattered. There are moments during deep suffering where even small things become overwhelming. Conversations drain you. Social situations exhaust you. Your mind never fully rests. Anxiety follows you into moments that should feel peaceful. And perhaps you keep asking yourself, why do I feel this way? But sometimes, your soul is simply exhausted from carrying pain for too long without healing properly. There are people tonight who secretly feel spiritually tired too. They prayed for things that never happened. Trusted people who betrayed them. Tried to stay hopeful through heartbreak after heartbreak. And eventually, part of them became discouraged. Not because they stopped believing in God completely, but because life became emotionally heavier than they knew how to carry anymore. But God sees what nobody else sees. He sees the nights you cried quietly while everyone else believed you were strong. He sees the moments where anxiety consumed your thoughts. He sees the emotional exhaustion hidden behind your smile. And maybe tonight, God wants you to know that your suffering has never been invisible to Him. There are seasons where God allows emotional breaking because the version of you built from survival can no longer sustain the future your soul truly needs. Pain strips away illusions. It forces honesty. It forces people to finally admit, I am not okay. And strangely, that honesty becomes the beginning of healing. Because healing cannot begin while pretending continues. Maybe tonight your exhaustion is not weakness. Maybe it is your spirit crying out for care after years of neglect. Maybe God is trying to show you that your peace matters too. That your soul matters too. That you cannot continue abandoning yourself forever while expecting your spirit to remain healthy. There are stronger parts of you waiting underneath this pain. Softer parts. Wiser parts. A version of you that no longer sacrifices peace just to feel loved. A version that understands healthy love does not require emotional self-destruction. A version that finally realizes rest is holy too. But transformation always feels painful before it feels beautiful. A broken bone hurts while healing too. And perhaps your soul is healing in ways you cannot fully see yet. One day, you will look back at this painful season differently. You will realize that some heartbreaks protected you. Some endings redirected you. Some painful collapses forced you to finally become honest about wounds you spent years avoiding. And perhaps most importantly, you will realize that even during the nights you thought you were completely alone, God was quietly carrying your spirit through every moment of suffering. So tonight, if your soul feels heavy, if your heart feels exhausted, if your mind feels overwhelmed by invisible pain nobody else fully understands, please remember this. You are not weak because you are struggling. You are not forgotten because you are hurting. And you are not beyond healing just because your wounds run deep. God is still present, even here. Quietly rebuilding parts of your soul you thought were permanently broken forever. One breath at a time. One night at a time. One prayer at a time. And maybe the greatest miracle is this: after everything life tried to break inside you, your heart still carries hope. Your soul still longs for healing. And your spirit still has enough strength to keep moving forward one more day. And if these words touched your heart tonight, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so we can continue walking together through healing, faith, peace, and hope in the videos ahead. Heavenly Father, tonight we come before you with hearts that feel exhausted beyond words. Some of us have spent so long pretending to be strong that we no longer know how to admit we are hurting. We continue smiling around people. We continue showing up every day. We continue carrying responsibilities while secretly feeling emotionally overwhelmed inside. And maybe tonight, Lord, there are people listening who feel like they are slowly breaking apart while nobody around them truly notices. So before anything else, please let your peace enter this moment. Let your presence calm every anxious thought. Let your comfort reach every wounded soul listening tonight. Father, there are people tonight whose minds never truly rest. Even in silence, their thoughts keep racing. Fear about the future. Regret about the past. Anxiety about things they cannot control. And slowly, the emotional pressure has become heavier than they know how to carry anymore. Lord, please quiet the storm inside their minds tonight. Silence the fear. Silence the overthinking. Silence the hopelessness. Replace those thoughts with your peace. Remind them that they do not need to carry every burden alone anymore. Father, some people listening tonight secretly feel broken because life hurt them deeply. They trusted people who betrayed them. They loved sincerely and still ended up abandoned. They gave their heart fully, only to feel emotionally unseen in return. And after enough heartbreak, they started believing something must be wrong with them. But Lord, please remind them tonight that their worth was never determined by who stayed or who walked away. Their value does not disappear because someone failed to love them correctly. They are still precious in your eyes. Still worthy. Still deeply loved by you. Lord, there are souls tonight carrying invisible wounds nobody else can fully see. Wounds from rejection. Wounds from loneliness. Wounds from years of feeling emotionally unsupported while trying to stay strong for everyone else. Some people listening tonight became emotionally strong because they had no other choice. They learned how to survive silently. Learned how to bury tears. Learned how to carry pain quietly because life never gave them space to fall apart safely. But Father, surviving for too long has exhausted their spirit. So tonight, please let them rest emotionally for a moment. Let them feel safe enough to stop pretending they are okay all the time. Father, there are people tonight who secretly feel emotionally numb. Not because they stopped caring, but because they cared too deeply for too long without feeling emotionally safe. They became afraid of vulnerability because pain always followed it. They became afraid of hoping because disappointment followed every hope they once carried. And now, they feel disconnected from peace itself. Lord, please breathe life back into those tired hearts tonight. Remind them that pain is not their permanent identity. Remind them that healing is still possible, even after years of suffering. Lord, there are people tonight carrying guilt they cannot let go of. They replay old mistakes repeatedly inside their mind. They punish themselves for things they wish they could undo. And the weight of that shame has slowly exhausted their soul. But Father, your mercy is greater than every failure. Greater than every regret. Greater than every painful chapter. So tonight, please help them forgive themselves the way you already forgave them. Release them from chains they were never meant to carry forever. Father, there are souls tonight who feel deeply alone. Surrounded by people, yet emotionally isolated inside. They became the strong one for everyone else while secretly wishing someone would notice how tired they really are. They listen to everyone else's pain while silently drowning in their own. Lord, please sit beside those lonely hearts tonight. Let them feel seen by you. Understood by you. Loved by you. Remind them that even when the world overlooks their suffering, you never do. Father, there are people tonight terrified about the future. They do not know how things will work out. Some are carrying financial stress, relationship pain, emotional exhaustion, spiritual confusion. And because they cannot clearly see what comes next, fear keeps stealing their peace every single day. But Lord, tonight we place the future into your hands. Teach us to trust you even when life feels uncertain. Teach us that we do not need every answer immediately to continue moving forward. Remind us that you are already standing in tomorrow before we even arrive there. Lord, there are hearts tonight simply tired of fighting. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying invisible pain nobody understands. And maybe some people listening right now are barely holding on emotionally. So Father, please hold on to them tonight. Wrap them in peace deeper than understanding. Speak hope into the places inside them that feel hopeless. Remind them that this painful season will not last forever. Remind them that healing takes time, and they are allowed to rest while healing happens. Father, there are people tonight who secretly believe they are too broken to fully recover emotionally. Too damaged to ever feel peace again. But Lord, you specialize in restoring exhausted souls. You bring beauty out of brokenness. Light out of darkness. Hope out of despair. And even now, while they are still hurting, you are quietly rebuilding parts of their spirit they thought were permanently destroyed. Father, thank you for staying close to us even during our darkest nights. Even when anxiety feels louder than faith. Even when we feel emotionally shattered and too exhausted to pray anymore. You still remain beside us quietly. Loving us. Carrying us. Protecting us through every painful chapter of our lives. And tonight, before we sleep, we surrender every burden into your hands. Every fear. Every heartbreak. Every anxious thought. Every hidden wound. Every silent battle nobody else knows about. We place it all before you tonight. Please let this be a night of peace for overwhelmed minds. A night of healing for wounded hearts. A night where exhausted souls finally feel safe enough to rest. And tomorrow morning, when we wake up again, give us enough strength to continue moving forward one more day. One breath at a time. One prayer at a time. One small step at a time. Amen. And if this prayer stayed with your heart tonight, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so we can continue walking together through healing, faith, peace, and hope in the videos ahead. And after all the pain, after all the nights you cried quietly while pretending to be strong for everyone else, after all the moments you wondered if your soul would ever feel peaceful again, there comes a moment where God begins changing something deep inside you. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But slowly, gently, like sunlight entering a room that has been dark for a very long time. At first, you barely notice it. The pain is still there. The memories still hurt. Some nights still feel heavy. But somehow, the suffering no longer controls your soul the same way it once did. The fear becomes quieter. The anxiety loosens its grip. And one day, you realize something powerful. God was never trying to destroy you through your suffering. He was transforming you through it. There are seasons in life where God allows everything unstable to fall apart because the version of you built from fear, exhaustion, and emotional survival can no longer carry the future your soul was created for. And while that transformation is happening, it feels terrifying. You lose comfort. Lose certainty. Sometimes you lose people you thought would stay forever. And in those moments, it feels like your entire world is collapsing. But later, you begin understanding something deeper. Some endings were protection. Some heartbreaks were redirection. Some painful separations were God saving your soul from paths that would have slowly destroyed your peace completely. Human beings often hold on to things that quietly damage them because familiarity feels safer than change. We stay in relationships that drain us because loneliness scares us more than suffering. We continue chasing approval because rejection feels unbearable. We build our identity around pleasing others while secretly abandoning ourselves emotionally every single day. And eventually, the soul becomes exhausted from living disconnected from truth. Maybe there were people you begged God not to remove from your life, not realizing they were slowly poisoning your spirit. Maybe there were dreams you cried over losing, not understanding that God was protecting your future from becoming emotionally empty. And maybe tonight, for the first time, you are beginning to understand why certain chapters had to end. Because sometimes God removes what your emotions desperately want, in order to save what your soul desperately needs. There are moments during transformation where you stop recognizing yourself. The old version of you no longer fits anymore. The things that once mattered deeply suddenly feel empty. You stop craving validation the same way. Stop chasing emotionally unavailable people the same way. Stop tolerating chaos just to avoid loneliness. And while that shift feels lonely at first, it is also holy. Because God is teaching your soul what real peace feels like. Before the suffering, maybe your worth depended on being chosen by others. Being admired. Being needed. But pain changes priorities. Heartbreak strips away illusions. Deep suffering forces honesty. And eventually, you begin understanding that your value was never supposed to depend on temporary human approval in the first place. Through God's eyes, you are not your trauma. Not your anxiety. Not your worst mistakes. Not the nights you spent crying silently because life became emotionally unbearable. You are still loved. Still worthy. Still valuable, even while healing. There are people listening tonight who survived seasons they once believed would completely destroy them. Nights where loneliness became unbearable. Days where emotional exhaustion made even simple tasks feel impossible. Moments where they smiled outwardly while internally begging God for relief. And somehow, despite all of it, they are still here. Still breathing. Still searching for peace. Still listening. And maybe that itself is proof that God never stopped carrying them, even during the nights they felt abandoned. Sometimes transformation begins the moment a person finally admits how tired they truly are. Healing cannot begin while pretending continues. Some of you spent years convincing everyone around you that you were okay while secretly collapsing emotionally inside. You became strong because you thought you had no choice. You carried everyone else's burdens while neglecting your own soul completely. And eventually, your spirit became exhausted beyond words. But maybe tonight, God is not disappointed in you for being tired. Maybe He is inviting you into rest for the very first time. Real rest. Not distraction. Not emotional numbness. But deep peace. The kind of peace that still exists even when life remains uncertain externally. There are things suffering teaches that comfort never could. Pain teaches compassion. Discernment. Emotional depth. Spiritual dependence. Some of the gentlest souls in this world became gentle because life broke them deeply, and they chose softness anyway. Their kindness came from surviving darkness. Their wisdom came from heartbreak. Their strength came from nights nobody else saw. And perhaps one day, your story will become healing for someone else too. Because people who survive deep suffering carry a different kind of light inside them. There are souls tonight who still feel trapped between two versions of themselves. The old version built from survival, and the healed version God is slowly creating underneath the pain. And that in-between space feels lonely, confusing, uncertain. But transformation always feels uncomfortable before it feels beautiful. A seed buried underground probably feels forgotten before it becomes a tree. But hidden growth is still growth. And maybe your soul has been growing quietly this entire time, even while you thought your life was falling apart. One day, you will look back at this painful season differently. You will realize that certain heartbreaks protected you. Certain endings redirected you. Certain painful collapses forced you to finally become honest about wounds you spent years trying to ignore. And perhaps most importantly, you will realize that even during your darkest nights, God was still rebuilding your soul quietly underneath the ruins. There are stronger parts of you emerging now. Softer parts. Wiser parts. A version of you that no longer sacrifices peace just to feel accepted. A version that protects their spirit instead of constantly abandoning it for others. A version that finally understands rest is holy too. And maybe that is the true miracle of transformation. Not becoming perfect, but finally becoming honest. Honest about your exhaustion. Honest about your wounds. Honest about what your soul truly needs in order to heal. There are people tonight who still fear they may never fully recover emotionally. Afraid their wounds run too deep. But God specializes in restoring exhausted souls. He brings beauty out of brokenness. Light out of darkness. Hope out of despair. And even now, while you are still healing, He is quietly rebuilding parts of your spirit you thought were permanently destroyed forever. So tonight, before you sleep, breathe deeply for a moment. Release the pressure to have everything figured out immediately. Release the fear that this painful season defines your entire future. Release the belief that you are too broken to heal. And trust that God is still working, even in silence. Even in uncertainty. Even here. Because the pain you feel today will not last forever. One day, you will understand why certain chapters happened exactly the way they did. And when that day comes, you may finally realize that God was never punishing you through suffering. He was preparing you. Strengthening you. Transforming you into the person your soul was always meant to become. Stronger. Softer. Wiser. More peaceful. More connected to Him than ever before. And maybe the greatest miracle of all, is that after everything life tried to break inside you, your heart still carries hope. Your soul still longs for healing. And your spirit still has enough faith to keep moving forward one more day. And if these words touched your heart tonight, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so we can continue walking together through healing, faith, peace, and hope in the videos ahead.